So the government, is running the smear campaign to try to get him, to defame him. But the problem was he was making so many small accomplishments and continuing the fight that all the people that were behind him, they weren't going to be deterred by a newspaper article or an arrest for some real estate fraud or, a possible bank robbery that someone said that he told them to do. It was just so convoluted. But what wasn't convoluted was the rally in Columbus Circle, the Columbus Day rally, the picketing at the FBI, the picketing of the New York Times, the picketing of the Staten Island Advance, the people that showed up on Wednesdays and got their chance to speak to the members of the dais, and within 24 hours, the problems were solved. The car accident that the insurance company faulted them for and knocked them off the policy, and all these different things that were happening to Italian Americans in the 50s and the 60s. And you mentioned language earlier about speaking the language. One of the things I always wanted people to understand about Joe Colombo is the era that he grew up in, and that post-World War II era was a very interesting time for an Italian American who was born in America. Because they were watching their parents and their friends' parents get harassed by the FBI because Hoover had a giant Red Scare going on. And there were literally people that spoke Italian at their jobs to another Italian that were fired from their jobs. Their bank assets frozen. They had their houses searched because of the scare, because of what Mussolini was a part of, in Axis powers. And when Joe Colombo fought in the war, saw action, saw friends die, and comes home to this, he had a very strong hatred for the FBI at an early age.
Well, it was kind of like a boiling point. So Italians, especially old school, have an inherent that we got from Italy, an inherent distrust for the states. You kind of have that pillar, if you will, right? Then you throw in, there's two things that Italians don't like. We don't like fascists. I'm sorry, we don't. And number two is we don't love communists. Now it's funny. I have a communist cousin in Italy, but the communist part in Italy is like 2%, right? The point being is Italians don't like communists.
Sooner to be an anarchist.
Correct. Exactly. They don't like communists or fascists. Socialism is another discussion, but what I'm saying is the working rule is those are fascists and fascists and comunista non mi piace, right? Keep it simple. So I get that part. So I see and I get how they would kind of tickle the wire with the mobsters to go against the Westerns.
Yeah.
And when it was convenient, they went against the mob, right? Which is a whole nother discussion. But there was dynamics to Colombo that people don't realize. He was a veteran. He was also a Freemason.
Yeah.
And he had, he had institutional power. Like, talked about like omitting certain things, but like locally and that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of all, again, you look at not just a single body of evidence, but the broader body of evidence, it kind of supports your theory. So I don't want to give too much away and get the book, Colombo book, and I want to talk about some other subjects as well. But to wind up the discussion on the book, Don, where did you end up without giving too much away? Where did you kind of end up and what should people look out for?
As far as my theory on the shooting?
Yeah. Like how, do you think it was more FBI? Do you think there's a CIA tinge, a little bit of both?
I think it was definitely FBI. In my depiction of what happened, not definitely like I have the evidence to it, but I spent a lot of time on the FBI CIA conspiracy because a lot of that stuff, the ballistics report on the gun, the way that it was executed, the fact that Greg Scarpa was already working with them and he was already doing operations for the FBI and the CIA at the time. So, I do think that they were the most capable. One of the main questions I had to answer as I was writing this book, and I just sat there and it's just like, what